The new definition of engagement in 2026 is actually simple actions and intent and affects future visibility.
Don't obsess or worship a single attribution model. Use like that triangle method where you focus on platform attribution, last click analytics, and incrementality tests. The more engagement that you get, the more visibility you get, and so on and so forth. And it really becomes this flywheel. Inbox providers care about user behavior now. They want to see that people actually want your emails.
Heat map or like tap map signals. Basically, on your email, where did they click? What blocks got attention? Because this is something that will give you an identification of what actually mattered on your email. Yo, Chase, I got a question for you. How many times a week do you hear someone say, our engagement is down?
I would say probably at least 4 or 5 times a week. And when I ask them in return, what do you mean by engagement? They specifically say open rates have dropped.
And that's the problem here today. So, in 2026, engagement is just not opens and clicks anymore. Let's talk about this. You ready? 3,
Yeah, let's do it.
2, 1.
From the open to the click, they're the masters of the flow. Just watch your list grow and your leads turn to go. Did we retain you so far, or do we have to extend it? If you want results, you know you gotta send it. Yeah, you know you gotta send it. Yeah, you know you gotta send it. Yeah. You know you gotta send it.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Send It, where we discuss anything and everything retention marketing, specifically in email and SMS marketing and e-commerce. My name is Jimmy Kim, and I'm here with my co-host,
Chase Diamond.
All right, listen. All right, so kind of what I was kind of starting off here, but the reality of things is this. Open rates are noisy, super noisy these days. Apple Mail, privacy protection, preloads these images. So you're really getting a bunch of fake opens. And I don't care what ESPs are doing in the end of the day. These things are causing all sorts of confusion. Bots that are clicking links, inboxes that are now AI sorted with the Gmail update. And then, of course, there's attribution. So if you're still measuring success by open rates, I think that people are optimizing for the wrong thing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's spot on, dude. I think if you're making decisions based on this data that doesn't really reflect reality, you're going to find yourself in a tough spot.
Yeah. So today I want to shoot this pod here today. We're going to redefine engagement, what it really means in 2026, what metrics you should track, what you should ignore, and how to prove retention impact even with all these privacy and AI changes. So,
Okay.
I want this pod to be the one that you bring to your team and say, here's our new metric stack. Here's what we optimize for. Here's what we're obsessing over. Because if you don't update these engagements or the definitions of these engagements today, you're going to continue making bad decisions confidently.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. All right. So let's start with the fundamental shift. Why do you think the definition of engagement changed so far?
I think it's 2 primary reasons. I think the first is inbox providers have changed how they work. And then the second being that tracking has completely changed and been disrupted.
All right. Well, let's start with the privacy thing. What do you think happened?
So this is going back a little bit in time, but in 2021, Apple Mail, they launched like their kind of privacy protection. And it just completely broke how people do open rate tracking.
Yeah. So let's break that down just a little bit more.
Sure. So essentially, Apple started preloading all images in an email before the actual end user even sees them. So essentially, your ESP, your OmniSend, your Klaviyo, doesn't matter who you're using. They think that someone, AKA quote unquote, opened when it really was just Apple's servers downloading the image.
Yeah. Essentially, the layman's term is that these inflated open rates just don't mean anything.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's not just Apple, right? Gmail has been testing similar features. So, if your list is 40 to 60% Apple Mail, for example, your open rates are basically fiction.
Yeah. And I don't think this is going away.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not. I think privacy, as we're seeing, is only getting stricter. Everything from like iOS to your browsers to the email clients, etc. Everyone's really moving, kind of aggressively towards more privacy protection.
Yeah. So the reality is, if your entire strategy is built on open rates, I think you're on a lot of trouble these days.
Exactly. And alongside that, like the second big change was Google and Yahoo. They now also kind of dropped new requirements in 2024 that really change the whole email marketing game and landscape.
Yeah. Let's remind the audience real quick. What were those requirements that changed?
Yeah, so really simply, there's three of them, right? Number one is authentication. So you need SPF, DKIM, and DMARC set up correctly. Number two is you need the ability to allow people to easily, in one click, unsubscribe from your email. And then the third primary one would be you have to keep your spam complaints, and this is very strict, under zero point 0.3.
Yeah. And what happens if someone or a marketer or a business does not meet these requirements?
The fact of the matter is your emails are not going to get delivered.
Yeah. So what they're basically saying is optimize for real engagement or you lose access to the inbox, basically.
Yeah, exactly right. Inbox providers care about user behavior now. They want to see that people actually want your emails.
Yeah. And then, of course, something we just talked about in November, but there's this whole algorithm change happening in Gmail, right?
Yeah, Gmail especially is leaning really hard into AI lately.
Yeah, I was reading about it and seeing it happen in real time. But Gmail is basically using AI to decide what emails are getting shown prominently, what are getting auto summarized, and basically what gets buried in different parts of your tabs, like the promotions tab. So, not only are you competing with other brands now, you're competing with the algorithm interpreting what's relevant for that end user. And this algorithm looks past the engagement. It's someone's constantly opening, clicking your email. You do get prioritized, but if they never open, well, then they put you at the bottom. So engagement history affects future visibility.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the best way to think about this is just how we think about social media algorithms, right? The more engagement that you get, the more visibility you get, and so on and so forth. And it really becomes this flywheel. Hey, it's Chase. Got 30 quick seconds? We built something specifically for you. Jimmy and I together have over 20 years of combined experience in email marketing, and we finally put everything together in one place. And it's called Ecom Email Certified. I know it's fancy, but it's going to be great. Whether you're brand new or running campaigns for 7, 8, 9-figure brands, it covers it all. Deliverability, AI, copywriting, design, strategy, SMS, literally everything. Has over 175 total modules, totaling 25 plus hours of content. It even has quizzes, a community, and you're going to get a real certification. It's way better than college, right? Don't tell your professor that, but it is. And we've designed it to take you from beginner to certified expert. We're talking about the kind of marketer who actually moves the needle and drives real revenue. Check it out at ecomemailcertified.com. And now back to the pod.
Yeah. So if you're sending to unengaged people constantly, you're training the algorithm that your emails just don't matter.
Yeah, exactly right. And then even your engaged subscribers are going to unfortunately stop to seeing you over time,
Yeah, that makes sense. So all right, let's address the elephant in the room. Are open rates completely useless now?
No, I don't think I'd say they're completely useless, right? But they're less important of a metric at best. Definitely not in the top 3 or top 5.
What do you think? What do you mean by that?
So essentially, I think the way that you can think about this is it means that you can use opens for like directional questions. Is this list broadly alive or broadly engaged? Or is this campaign performing better or worse than usual or typical?
Yeah, and you can't use opens to measure creative quality or subject performance anymore, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's right. Because too much of your open rate is just going to be fake, inaccurate data.
Yeah. So when I think about this, I think about what the open rate can tell me, basically, right? So there's a few things. Like you said, the list health direction. If your open rate drops from like 30 to 15% over 3 months, there's probably something wrong happening there. And it's not just performance oriented. It could be deliverability issues. It can be all sorts of things. There's also the relative performance. Campaign A got 25%, campaign B got 15%. Campaign A probably did better, but you need to check the clicks and revenue to be sure there. And then, of course, I think another thing that's really important that it tells you is how your segmentation is doing, right? So if your VIP segment gets like a 45% and your general list gets like a 30% or 20%, well, that is really segmentation working. So it's a signal, just not a signal. Like it's hard to say that, right? It's a signal, but it's not a signal.
Yeah, and I think the problem is we've spent so many years as marketers just worshiping kind of open rates as like the end all be all. Don't worship it anymore, right? But obviously don't go and ignore it entirely.
So what do you think the danger is if teams are still treating open rates like a gospel, basically?
Yeah, I think quite frankly, they just make bad decisions. So a real example that we've seen recently. So I'm just going to say brand A. So they send, let's say, 2 subject lines. Subject line 1 gets a 35% open rate, and subject line 2 gets a 28% open rate.
Yeah, and then of course they take subject line 1 and say that's the winner.
Yeah, that's right. And then they don't dive into clicks or conversions. So, the reality is when you check, revenue, subject line 2 may have drove 40% more sales and revenue.
Yeah, because open rates don't equal revenue.
Yeah, that's right. Subject line 1 might have just won because it was more clickbaity and it got opens, but it didn't actually drive any intent or action.
So, look, if you're optimizing for opens, you're probably optimizing for curiosity, but that doesn't ultimately mean conversions.
Yeah, right. I mean, we see it on social. Virality and curiosity doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get paid.
Yeah, that's very true. And one thing you did was, and you mentioned it earlier, I think we want to double tap on this, but inboxes are becoming like social feeds. Break that down for us.
Yeah, so Gmail's promotions tab, right, now kind of has like this most relevant sorting that's going to push, frequently engaged brands to the top of that sort. So if I always open an email from brand X, right, they're likely going to show up first at the top. And if I don't open emails from brand Y, they're going to get pushed and buried towards the bottom or potentially even not exist entirely.
Yeah, so engagement becomes almost a visibility lever.
Yeah, and that's a huge, huge mindset shift for email marketers, all right? The goal is no longer send more emails. The goal is to now generate signals that tell the inbox algorithm that this sender matters.
Yeah, which means that we're making a shift into quality over quantity. All right. So if open rates isn't the answer anymore, what should we be tracking? What do you think about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we need to focus on a real engagement stack. And there's kind of 4 layers here. And if your team tracks these 4 layers, you're going to be ahead of almost all, if not all, marketers, right? So, and if you're not, you're going to be behind.
Yeah. So I've got the list here that we're going to talk about. So we got layer 1, which is deliverability health. I think that this is the can we even play this game layer, right?
Yeah, that's right. Like if your deliverability is broken, literally nothing else matters.
Yeah. And, I think you mentioned it earlier, but obviously the spam complaints are really important, keeping them under 0.3, even ideally under 0.1 if possible. You've got your unsubscribe rate. I think this is something people don't pay enough attention to. Should be under 0.5% per send. You want to make sure it's going to happen, but you want to have it low, right? There's also the hard bounce. This is when the email is bad or it's getting rejected, right? It should be under about 2%. Don't ever have that thing spike because then there's a real big problem. And then, of course, you've got the entire authentication compliant SPF, DKIM, DMARC. You got to have that thing set up and make sure that the one-click unsubscribe is all set up too. And if any of these are out of range, the reality is you're probably getting filtered or blocked entirely. Gmail and Yahoo will literally stop sending your emails for you. And so this is really the foundation, in my opinion.
Yeah, and a quick kind of hot take I was thinking about here. I'd say your deliverability health is the leading indicator of your future revenue.
Ooh, I like that. Why do you say that?
Well, like you kind of just said, like if your emails aren't getting delivered, like you have 0 chances to make any sales or revenue, right? So your revenue is going to tank. And by the time that you actually notice the revenue drop, unfortunately, your revenue is going to have been taking a hit for quite a week because your deliverability has been broken for weeks or maybe even months. So you need to monitor these metrics ongoing, especially before they become, in crisis mode.
Okay, I like that. That's a good hot take. All right, let's go to layer 2. It's behavioral engagement. This is where we replace opens and actions.
Right. Essentially we want to know, what did this subscriber actually do?
So what are the key metrics here in your opinion? Hey, it's Jimmy, and I've got 30 seconds to tell you something that will change how you get inspired on your very next marketing campaign. When you're screenshotting those emails in your inbox and Slack and pasting them here, you saw it on Twitter, trying to remember what brand did that killer Black Friday sequence. Well, guess what? Inbox.ai just solved that. It's an AI-powered database with over 1 million real emails from the best D2C brands, Ridge, Fenty Skin, Casper. They're all in there. You can search by promotional type, journey stages, whatever you need. Get AI breakdowns of what worked and why, track your competitors, and even request brands that are not in there. No more hunting through screenshots or save folders. Inbox.ai turns your inspiration into revenue. Check it out at inbox.ai, link in the show description.
I think we should break this down by maybe email and SMS. I can start with email.
Yeah.
So for email, I think number 1 is click rate. So essentially the raw percentage of people who clicked. Number two would be kind of the click to open ratio. Again, use this a little bit cautionally because opens are now noisy. Number three would be like the reply rate. So especially for plain text or kind of conversational sends. Four could be something like maybe like the forward or share rate, if and when kind of applicable. And then number five would maybe be like the time to the first click, I guess. So essentially how fast people act after you send. That's for email.
Okay, that's solid. And let's talk about SMS.
So I think SMS is actually a bit cleaner because there's no fake open rate problem. And the four here would be like number one, click through rate. So did they click/tap the link? Reply rate is did they respond? Opt out rate is like are people opting out? Are they unsubscribing? And what was the delivery rate? So are messages being filtered by carriers or are they getting delivered?
Yeah, and I have some pretty deep history in SMS, but carriers like AT&T and Verizon are super strict about filtering.
Yeah, and I think rightfully so. And again, if your SMS compliance is bad, you're going to get blocked so fast.
Yeah, and it's a big problem when it happens. So, all right, let's go to layer 3, intent signals. This is where you graduate from the channel metrics to the customer behavior, right?
Yeah, that's right. And essentially what we're asking here is what happened after someone clicked?
Okay, so if you're tracking this, you're really thinking about like the site sessions within X sends, right? Like, did they visit your site? Like, you got to coordinate that. You've got things like your product views and your add to cart messaging. Did they browse and add carts? Return visitors. This is really important. How many times did they come back? And one thing that I really like is like heat map or like tap map signals. Basically, on your email, where did they click? What blocks got attention? Because this is something that will give you an identification of what actually mattered on your email. And I believe most ESPs show you this, right?
Yeah, I'd say Omnisend, Klaviyo, Mailchimp, etc. Most platforms kind of have this heat map showing you, what parts of your emails are getting clicked, etc.
And really, that just tells you what content is actually working.
Yeah, and if everyone's clicking the hero image but ignoring your product grid, kind of gives you some areas of focus.
Yeah. So these are like the I did something metric, not the I might have opened. I feel like that's really important here.
Yeah, the intent signal shows the actual behavior, not more of kind of what we call like the passive exposure.
Okay. So now we got layer 4, which is the business outcomes. This is the layer executives really care about, the founders and the head of departments and so forth.
Yeah, so if you're an email marketer, an agency, a freelancer, this is where you're going to prove kind of the value of the work that you're doing on the email and retention side.
So what are some of the key metrics that you think about here?
Revenue per recipient is definitely an important one. So essentially answering how much revenue per person you emailed. Revenue per click, so how valuable is each click? The conversion rate from the click, so what percentage of clicks turn into actually purchasers? And then the contribution margin percent. So if you're advanced and kind of factoring in product costs, this is a good one for you.
Okay. And those are good. But, one of the things that I think is really important is the negative outcomes too. I think that's something we should be talking about too, right?
Yeah, you're right. I guess those were more positive. Like you want those to be focused and high and optimized, whereas the negative ones, right, are things like complaint rate spikes or people marking you as spam after certain campaigns, are unsubscribe rates, increasing. Like do people, opt out because you said something insensitive or wrong or just it's not relevant? And then what does your refund or kind of cancel correlation look like? So are aggressive promos leading to maybe even more returns?
Yeah, that's a good one because the reality is with good retention, it's all about long-term trust, not short-term revenue spikes that people are chasing basically.
Yeah, look, if you want to drive a bunch of sales, but half of them refund and unsubscribe, there's no point, right? Like don't optimize for the wrong thing.
Yeah. So I think about this and I feel like there's a dashboard that people could create out of this thing, right? What do you think should be on this magical dashboard these days?
Yeah, I think like the four boxes that matter would be box number one, deliverability. So complaint rate, unsubscribe rate, bounce rate. Number two would be like the behavioral engagement. So the click rate, the reply rate, and maybe the time to click. Box three would be focused on the intent signal. So site sessions, product views, add to cart, etc. And then the last one is box four, which would be that business outcomes, revenue per recipient, conversion rate, and then revenue per click.
I didn't hear anything about open rate here.
Yeah, that was intentional. So I'd say maybe put that in as like a diagnostic kind of metrics section at the bottom. Look at it if you need to, but don't focus on it and obsess over it. Don't optimize for it overly.
Yeah. So so it's there, but it's not driving decisions ultimately. All right,
Right.
let's talk about attribution, because even with all these great metrics, attribution is really still messy right now.
Oh boy. Attribution, even in 2026, is still such a nightmare, dude. You obviously know that as well as anyone. Um, Multi-touch behavior, privacy changes, cross-device journeys, dark social, the list goes on, right? Someone might see your email on their phone. They might click it on their laptop. They might buy 3 days later after seeing a retargeting ad.
And then you go, what channel gets the credit?
And then every marketer says, well, it depends. It depends on your attribution model. And every model has its flaws.
Well, there's a couple ways that in email and retention that you look at attribution models. So there's the last click, right, which is my favorite one because it's really a direct correlation. Whenever that click is right before getting the last purchase, usually gets the credit. And then there's the first click, what was the first thing they interacted with, which could get the credit. And then there's a linear one. I believe like this is what like every ESP and everyone does out there in the market, which is like every touch point gets the credit. And then of course, time decay, which is really the recent touch points get more credit. It's kind of like a slope based around how far away it has. And then, of course, you think about the platform attribution too, right? Everybody's going to make credit behind it. And these are the problems. All you have is an incomplete picture many times.
Yeah, exactly. And if you use last click, right, email looks terrible because people often click through paid ads or organic search right before buying.
100%. But an email might have never gotten to them interested in the first place, right? Like if it never got to them already, they might not even be interested.
Yeah, and if you're only looking at platform attribution, right, you're trusting Omnisend, Klaviyo, Attentive, like again, doesn't matter who to tell you how valuable are, it's going to have some bias.
So how do you think people should solve this bias?
Yeah, it's hard. I think the simple way to think about it would be like the triangle method, where you have to have 3 different sources of truth.
Hey, quick 60-second break to shout out our title sponsor, Omnisend. If you don't know them, Omnisend is an all-in-one email and SMS platform built specifically for e-commerce. They've trusted by over 155,000 merchants with a 4.8 rating star on Shopify's marketplace with over 2,800 plus reviews. People love using them. Their support is incredible, responsive team, great help docs, and they actually show up when you need them. Third, look, everyone loves saving a buck. They've got great features and great pricing. Listen, I've heard this inside the community that someone actually dropped their bill by almost 50% and then included their SMS costs, which is absolutely wild. Another agency that we talked to shifted all his clients over when he discovered that he can save them 30 to 60% off of their actual monthly bill. And they're taking that money now, reinvesting into ads, and that real money is going to come back into your pocket too, because you're helping them out, or, whatever it might be. With all this, I literally just helped Chase migrate his personal list to Omnisend not too long ago. It was super easy. They got team, they have an automated solution. It's really great. So if you're looking to scale your email and SMS game, check out omnisend.com/send it. Tell them Chase and Jimmy sent you. Now back to your pod. Okay, I would love to break this thing down because I love the triangle method. Let's talk about it. Tell us about it a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Just keep it quite simple. So number 1 would be like platform attribution. So whatever ESP or SMS platform reports. The next part might be focused on last click in Google Analytics. So what GA4 says drove the conversion. And then the last one would be like kind of incrementality proxies. So holdout tests, geo splits, and time-based tests.
Okay. Those are like very simple. It's triangulating, I guess, right?
Yep. And the point here is not perfect attribution. The point is like directionally correct decision making.
Give me an example of that. I feel like the listeners would enjoy this.
Sure. Okay. So let's say Omnisend says email drove $100,000, but Google Analytics says email drove maybe 50K. And let's say you do a holdout test where you don't need to send 10% off to your list, and that 10% generates 20% or less revenue, right?
Yeah, and that's how a holdout test proves email is driving meaningful incremental revenue, basically, right?
Yeah, you know how email works, even if the exact number is a little bit kind of fuzzy.
So you're building confidence in the channel, but not really chasing a perfect attribution.
Yeah, that's correct, right? Like, I don't think, and again, this is just my opinion, I don't think perfect attribution exists, at least not in the present. But I do think you can be confident in your strategy when you take an approach like this.
That's good. I like that. All right, let's get into some action points because I think those will be helpful.
Sure. So 3 kind of immediate actions for you to take. I'd say number 1 is first, rebuilding your KPI dashboard.
Okay. Tell everyone how.
So again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but moving like the open rate to more of like the diagnostic only section at the bottom, and bringing up and really focusing on like the complaint rate, the unsubscribe rate, the click rate, site sessions after send, and then revenue per recipient.
Yeah, these are the metrics we talked about earlier that are actually driving business outcomes that are getting moved to the top, right?
Yeah, and if you start measuring it, that allows your team to start actually optimizing for what's important and what matters.
Okay, and then now we got the second action. What do you think?
So this is going to be optimizing for like the inbox algorithms because again, Gmail, Yahoo, Apple, etc., they're all focused on prioritizing this engagement now.
So what are you thinking here? What do you think people should do?
Number 1 is segment harder. So stop batching and blasting. Again, we've been talking about this for a long time. More important than ever to stop that and really focusing on sending relevant messages to the right relevant people. And then from there, you also want to cut dead weight. So stop sending to 90-day plus non-openers. And then you want to send fewer but better messages. So really focusing on quality over just quantity.
Yeah, because these new requirements around that one-click unsubscribe and low complaint tolerance really are focused on delivering quality, right?
Yeah, not that we ever were proponents of spam, but especially today, you cannot spam your way to success anymore. You do really have to earn inbox placement.
Okay. Well, tell us about the third one now.
Yeah, the third one would be focusing on like adding like intent kind of instrumentation to your campaigns.
Okay, what does that mean?
So essentially making sure that you can track what actually happens after a click. So keeping things like your UTMs very consistent. So every link has proper UTMs and they don't change from campaign to campaign, right? Like you can tell what your links are about. The next one would be like post-click behavior tracking. So connecting your ESP to GA4 or whatever analytics tool you're using. And then the next one would be focusing on like micro conversion goals. So tracking product page views, added to cart, started checkout, not just solely purchase-based stuff.
Well, I like that. So you're really looking at that like full funnel and not just a click anymore, right?
Yeah, and this is really going to help you see like which campaigns drive like real intent versus maybe more like curiosity-based clicks.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the quick recap, the new definition of engagement in 2026 is actually simple actions and intent and not quite much vanity metrics.
Exactly. And track 4 different layers. So deliverability health, behavioral engagement, intent signals, and then business outcomes. And you're going to want to do that by replacing your KPI dashboard, moving open rate to something that you look at, but moving towards the bottom as a lesser important thing. Promoting metrics that actually drive business decisions. That's going to make everyone in the business very happy. And don't obsess or worship a single attribution model. Use like that triangle method that we kind of briefly talked about, where you focus on platform attribution, last click analytics, and incrementality tests.
Well, I love that. That's a good wrap up. That's a wrap for today. This is really the new definition of engagement. So if you heard anything on this pod that is helpful or you want to share it to your retention team, I do highly recommend it because I promise someone is still celebrating open rate improvements out there. And that is really the wrong way to think about it. With that, that's a wrap here today. If you enjoyed today's pod, again, as always, please subscribe, follow, like, leave us a rating on whatever favorite podcast listening platform. We like YouTube the most, but you can follow the show on X, LinkedIn, YouTube, IG, TikTok, etc. And of course, there's a few ways to connect with us. Obviously, we've got them all in the show notes below. You can subscribe and be on our list at Ecom Email Marketer. We've got a course, we've got in-books, we've got so many things we have. We produce a show every Tuesday, so bookmark us, subscribe, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks, Chase.
Cheers.
From the open to the click, they're the masters of the flow. Just watch your list grow and your leads turn to go. Did we retain you so far, or do we have to extend it? If you want results, you know you gotta send it. Yeah, you know you gotta send it. Yeah, you know you gotta send it. Yeah, you know you gotta send it.